The rain hammered against the windows of Thunder Road like 1,000 impatient fists. Inside, the warm glow of copper fixtures and aged oak paneling created an island of comfort against the Arizona storm raging outside. The neon sign above the door flickered, casting intermittent blue and red shadows across the parking lot, where a solitary Ford F-150 King Ranch pulled in its headlights, cutting through the downpour. James Sullivan turned off the ignition, but remained seated, listening to the rhythmic pounding on the truck's roof. His weathered face reflected in the rearview mirror showed a man carrying burdens invisible to others. 45 years of life had left their mark in the silver threading through his dark hair and the fine lines around his steel blue eyes. A small scar above his right eyebrow told a story he rarely shared. He glanced down at the photograph tucked into his dashboard. A teenage girl with his eyes and a smile that belonged to someone else entirely. Sarah. 5 years since he'd seen her since the divorce that had torn his life apart. His callous thumb brushed across the image before he tucked it into his jacket pocket. Tonight changes everything, he whispered to himself, though he couldn't have explained why he felt it with such certainty. The Rolex Submariner on his wrist showed 9:42 p.m. as he stepped out into the rain, his leather jacket offering minimal protection against the deluge. The watch had been a gift from his SEAL team when he'd retired from active duty. 12 years of service, 4 deployments, and countless missions that remained classified. Now he worked security consultation for corporations, a comfortable living that left him hollow in ways he couldn't articulate. The neon sign of Thunder Road buzzed above him as he pushed open the heavy wooden door. Johnny Cash's deep baritone greeted him from the vintage jukebox in the corner, singing about hurt and redemption. The scent of whiskey leather and something cooking on the grill enveloped him. It smelled like a place where people came to forget or perhaps to remember. Most of the tables were empty. A Tuesday night storm wasn't good for business. A few regulars hunched over their drinks at the bar, while in the far corner sat a group that immediately caught James's professional attention. 6 men in leather cuts bearing the insignia of the Hell's Brotherhood Motorcycle Club. Veterans, if he read their patches correctly. They sat with the easy confidence of men comfortable with violence but not seeking it. Their leader, a mountain of a man with a silver beard and penetrating eyes, noticed James's assessment and raised his glass slightly. A professional courtesy between predators. James nodded back, choosing a booth with a clear view of both the entrance and the bikers. Rough night to be out. The voice belonged to a woman standing beside his table order pad in hand, red hair cascading over her shoulders in loose waves. Her name tag read, Emma, and her green eyes held a weariness that her smile couldn't quite mask. She couldn't have been more than 28, but something in those eyes spoke of burdens beyond her years. Aren't they all? James replied, the corner of his mouth turning up slightly. What can I get you? Whiskey. Neat? Whatever's good. Emma nodded and turned toward the bar. James noticed a small tattoo on her wrist as she moved, partially visible beneath her sleeve. She moved with efficiency, navigating between tables with practiced ease. Her black Thunder Road t-shirt had seen better days and her jeans bore the faint stains of restaurant work, but she carried herself with an undeniable dignity. Jameson, on the house, she said, returning with his drink. You look like you've had one of those days. James raised an eyebrow. That obvious? I've been serving drinks long enough to read people. She glanced toward the door as another crack of thunder shook the building. Not many come out in weather like this without good reason. James nodded his thanks and took a sip, letting the whiskey burn pleasantly down his throat. Emma lingered a moment longer than necessary, as if wanting to say more, then moved to check on the bikers. The leader of the motorcycle club greeted her with surprising warmth. Emma, darling, how's that brother of yours doing with those college applications? He's working on them still. Thanks for asking. Emma's voice softened with genuine affection. The usual for everyone? The man called Steele nodded, his massive hand gently patting Emma's arm. You know us too well. James watched the interaction with interest. The relationship seemed protective, almost paternal. Not what he'd expected. He observed as Emma moved efficiently behind the bar, preparing 6 different drinks with practiced hands. Her movements told the story of someone who had worked here for years, someone who knew every inch of the place like a second home. The storm intensified, outside rain now coming down in blinding sheets. The lights flickered once then again before stabilizing. Everyone glanced up nervously, but Emma just sighed. Generator will kick in if it goes out, she assured the room. We're used to this. As she served the bikers their drinks, James caught fragments of their conversation. Something about a charity ride for veterans, hospital visits, a dispute with another club. Steele's deep voice commanded attention without raising its volume, the others deferring to him naturally. A flash of lightning illuminated the parking lot outside, followed immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. Through the momentary brightness, James spotted 3 motorcycles pulling up beside his truck. Something in his gut tightened the old instinct that had kept him alive in war zones around the world. The door swung open seconds later, bringing in a gust of wind and rain, along with 3 men. The leader stepped forward, first shaking water from his leather jacket like a predator after a swim. He stood about 6 feet tall, lean and coiled with a tension that suggested violence lurking just beneath the surface. A vivid tattoo of a snake writhed up his neck, its fangs positioned just below his ear. The gold rings on his fingers caught the light as he ran a hand through his wet hair. The atmosphere in the bar changed instantly. Conversations died, glasses stopped halfway to lips, and even Johnny Cash seemed to lower his volume from the jukebox. Steele and his brotherhood straightened almost imperceptibly, not reaching for weapons, but no longer relaxed. James recognized the shift, the same alertness that came before an ambush in hostile territory. The newcomer surveyed the room, his gaze lingering on Steele's group before settling on Emma behind the bar. His mouth curved into something that resembled a smile but contained no warmth. Well, if it isn't Thunder Road, he said, voice carrying throughout the quiet space. Heard this place serves the best whiskey in the county. Emma's expression remained professional, but James noted how her hand gripped the bar towel more tightly. What can I get you, gentlemen? The man approached the bar, his 2 companions flanking him like bodyguards. He leaned forward, invading Emma's space. I'll take your finest bourbon. None of that well shit. Pappy Van Winkle, 15-year, she responded coolly. It's $40 a glass. He laughed, pulling out a money clip thick with hundreds. Honey, if I wanted to worry about prices, I wouldn't be here. He peeled off a $100 bill and slid it across the bar. Keep the change. Get my boys whatever they want, too. As Emma turned to fetch the bourbon, the man's eyes followed her with an intensity that made James set his glass down. The 2 companions took seats at the bar, both with the hardened look of men accustomed to violence. One had a poorly concealed shoulder holster visible when his jacket shifted. Haven't seen you around before, Emma said as she poured the expensive bourbon into a crystal glass. Ray Jackson, Mom, the man replied, raising his glass slightly. But everyone calls me Viper. My associates and I are looking to expand some business interests in the area. Thought we'd check out the local establishments. Emma nodded politely, but her body language had changed, becoming more guarded. She glanced briefly towards Steele, a look that didn't go unnoticed by Viper. I see you're already acquainted with the local color, Viper said, turning slightly toward the Brotherhood's table. Evening, Steele. Been a while. Steele's expression remained impassive, but his voice carried a warning. Not long enough, Viper. Thought Phoenix was more your territory these days. A man has to diversify, Viper replied with a shrug that failed to appear casual. Market's changing. The exchange contained layers of meaning beyond the words themselves. Old rivalries, territorial disputes, perhaps even blood spilled. James recognized the language of men with violent histories attempting civility in public. Emma moved away, coming to check on James's drink. Another, she asked, her voice lower than before. Please, James replied, matching her tone. Those men are trouble. Her eyes met his briefly. It's fine. Steele and the Brotherhood are regulars. They look out for this place. And the new arrival, Emma's expression tightened. Never seen him before tonight, but his type isn't hard to recognize. As she returned to the bar, Viper intercepted her path. So tell me, beautiful, how long have you worked in this dump? 5 years, Emma replied, attempting to step around him. Excuse me, I need to get another Jameson for the gentleman. Viper shifted, blocking her way. 5 years is a long time to waste in a place like this. Pretty girl like you could do better. I like it here just fine, Emma said, her patience visibly thinning. Owner must pay well to inspire such loyalty. The owner passed away last year, Emma said carefully. Her daughter runs it now. Viper's eyes lit with interest. Is that so? And who might that be? Emma hesitated, then lifted her chin slightly. Me. The revelation changed something in Viper's expression, a predatory calculation replacing mere harassment. Well, now that is interesting. Very interesting indeed. He reached out, fingers brushing Emma's arm in a gesture that crossed the line from unwanted attention to something more threatening. Perhaps you and I should discuss some business opportunities, owner to owner. Emma pulled her arm away. I'm not interested in any new opportunities. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have customers waiting. Viper's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. I don't think you understand. When I talk business, smart people listen. The atmosphere in the bar crystallized into something dangerous. Steele and his men shifted in their seats, hands disappearing beneath tables. The two men with Viper tensed, ready for trouble. James set his glass down and stood moving with deliberate casualness. But before he could intervene, Emma spoke, her voice steady and clear. Remove your hand or you'll be asked to leave. Viper laughed, his grip tightening. Asked by who, you and what army, sweetheart? The lady asked you to let go. James's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He now stood just a few feet away, his posture relaxed but his eyes focused with an intensity that made Viper's companions step back instinctively. Viper turned, assessing James with a sneer. This isn't your business, friend. I'm making it my business. James kept his tone conversational, but anyone with experience would recognize the danger beneath. The lady asked you nicely, I won't. Something in James's demeanor made Viper hesitate. Perhaps it was the way he stood balanced on the balls of his feet. Perhaps it was the absolute certainty in his eyes. Whatever the reason, Viper released Emma's wrist, though his expression promised future trouble. Another wannabe hero, Viper spat. This town seems full of them. Just a man enjoying a quiet drink, James replied, which is getting colder while we chat. Emma stepped back, rubbing her wrist where Viper's fingers had dug in. The moment stretched, a silent calculation of risk and reward playing behind Viper's eyes. Steele's deep voice broke the standoff. Everything all right over there, Emma? Just fine, Steele, she replied, never taking her eyes off Viper. Our new guest was just leaving. Weren't you? Viper's jaw clenched, but he forced a smile. For now, but I'll be back. Count on that. He threw some bills on the counter. For the bourbon. Wasn't worth the price. With a final glare at James, Viper motioned to his companions, and the three men stalked toward the door. The bell jingled as they exited into the storm, the sound incongruously cheerful against the tension they left behind. Emma exhaled slowly, her shoulders dropping as the door closed. Thank you, she said to James, but that probably wasn't wise. Probably not, James agreed, returning to his seat. Men like that keep track of slights. Steele approached his massive frame, dwarfing Emma, as he placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You okay, little bird? She nodded, attempting a smile. I'm fine, nothing I haven't handled before. That was Viper Jackson, Steele said, turning to James. Bad blood with our club going back 15 years. Drugs, prostitution, gun running, you name it. He's been trying to establish territory here for months. James nodded. Recognized the type. Steele studied James with newfound interest. You handled yourself well for a civilian. Military. SEALs, retired. Steele extended a hand. Marcus Reynolds. They call me Steele. Former Rangers 3rd Battalion. James shook the offered hand. James Sullivan. Let me buy you a drink, Sullivan. Any man who stands up for our Emma here is good in my book. Emma brought fresh drinks for both men, her hand steady now as the adrenaline ebbed. On the house, gentlemen. Least I can do. As she set down the glasses, James noticed the tattoo on her wrist more clearly. A small, distinctive design partially visible beneath her sleeve, an anchor intertwined with a rose. Something about it triggered a memory, but he couldn't place it. That's an interesting tattoo, he said, almost to himself. Emma glanced down at her wrist. Oh, this? It was my mother's design. I got it after she passed away last year. She always said it reminded her of someone special from her past. James froze glass halfway to his lips. A cold sensation spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the storm outside. Your mother, what was her name? Catherine, Catherine Hayes. Emma replied, a question in her eyes at his sudden intensity. Did you know her? The glass in James' hand trembled slightly. Catherine Hayes, a name he hadn't heard spoken aloud in over 25 years. A name he tried to forget and never could. I might have, he said carefully. A long time ago. What happened to her? Emma's expression softened with grief still fresh. Cancer. Fought it for 3 years, but in the end, she shook her head. She was the strongest person I ever knew. Steele squeezed Emma's shoulder gently. Catherine was something special. Saved my daughter's life after a motorcycle accident 10 years ago. Best ER nurse in the state. The pieces fell into place with devastating clarity. Catherine had become a nurse. She'd had a daughter approximately 25 years ago, and that tattoo an anchor with a rose. The same design James had tattooed on his own shoulder after SEAL training at a design Catherine had drawn for him. She never married, James asked, struggling to keep his voice casual. Emma shook her head. No, it was just her, me, and my little brother Ryan. She never talked much about our father. Said he was someone she loved who had to go away. She paused, studying James's face. Why all the questions? Before James could formulate an answer, headlights flashed across the windows as several vehicles pulled into the parking lot. The storm had subsided somewhat, but rain still pounded steadily outside. Steele moved to the window, his posture stiffening. Trouble, he said simply. Viper's back, and he brought friends. Emma paled slightly but squared her shoulders. Call the sheriff, she told the bartender, who was already reaching for the phone. Won't make it in time, Steele said grimly. Storm's got trees down all over the county road. James stood evaluating the situation with practiced efficiency. How many exits? Back door through the kitchen, fire exit by the restrooms, Emma replied quickly. Any weapons on the premises? Emma hesitated, then nodded. Shotgun under the bar. My mom's revolver in the office safe. Steele gestured to his men who were already forming a defensive perimeter around their table. We're armed. Legal permits. The door burst open and Viper stood there, flanked now by 8 men. The casual pretense was gone, replaced by naked menace. His eyes found Emma immediately. Time for that business discussion. Ms. Hayes, he called across the bar. Unless you want this place to have a very unfortunate kitchen fire tonight. James moved smoothly between Emma and the newcomers. Evening, gentlemen. Bar's closing early due to the weather. Perhaps you could come back another time. Viper's eyes narrowed with recognition and hatred. You, I knew I'd seen your face somewhere before. His hand drifted toward his waistband. James Sullivan, you were there when my brother got busted in that DEA operation in Phoenix. The revelation shifted the dynamic instantly. This wasn't just about the bar anymore, or even about Emma. This was personal. Your brother was trafficking heroin that killed teenagers, James replied calmly. He made his choices. And now you'll answer for yours, Viper snarled. But first, his gaze shifted to Emma. The lady and I have unfinished business. I told you I'm not interested, Emma said firmly. Viper's smile turned cruel. Oh, but I think you are, especially since my associates are currently keeping your brother Ryan company at his night class. He pulled out his phone, showing a photo of a teenage boy sitting in what appeared to be a college classroom, a man in a leather jacket sitting ominously close behind him. Emma's face drained of color. If you touch him, that depends entirely on you. Viper cut her off. All I want is this bar. Sign it over and your brother walks away unharmed. Refuse. He let the threat hang in the air. Steele stepped forward, but Viper's men drew weapons, creating a Mexican standoff in the middle of the bar. Think carefully, Viper continued. This place isn't worth your brother's life. You've got 30 seconds to decide. Emma's hands trembled, her eyes darting between Viper, James, and Steele. The few remaining patrons had pressed themselves against the walls, unwilling witnesses to the unfolding drama. James assessed the situation with cold precision. 8 hostiles, at least 5 armed, civilians present, the Brotherhood outnumbered but armed and experienced, and Emma's brother in immediate danger at a separate location. He made his decision in an instant. Emma, James said quietly, look at me. She turned her green eyes wide with fear. I won't let anything happen to your brother, he promised. Trust me. Viper laughed. Big words from a has-been. In one fluid motion, James grabbed Emma and pulled her down behind the solid oak bar as Viper's patience ran out and he drew his weapon. The first shot shattered a bottle of tequila, sending glass and liquor spraying across the back bar. Steele and his Brotherhood responded immediately, overturning tables for cover as they drew their own weapons. Stay down, James ordered Emma, already moving toward the end of the bar. Years of training took over his body, responding with muscle memory, honed in countless combat situations. Viper shouted orders to his men, two of whom were moving to flank the bar. James reached the shotgun before they could position themselves, pumping around into the chamber with a sound that momentarily cut through the cow. Emma, he called out, get to the office and lock the door. She crawled toward the back, keeping low as bullets splintered wood above her head. James provided covering fire, forcing Viper's men to seek their own cover. Steele's deep voice boomed over the gunfire. Sullivan 3, at your 2 o'clock, James acknowledged with a nod, shifting his position to counter the new threat. His mind calculated angles and trajectories, identifying priorities with cold efficiency. Get Emma to safety. Neutralize the immediate threat. Secure the bar. Find Ryan. A bullet grazed his arm, tearing through his jacket and drawing a line of fire across his bicep. James barely registered the pain, focusing instead on the man who'd fired it, a burly figure now exposed as he attempted to reload. The shotgun roared and the man went down with a cry of pain, clutching his leg where buckshot had torn through muscle and sinew. Across the room, Steele and his brotherhood were holding their own, their military training evident in their disciplined response to the ambush. They weren't shooting to kill, James noted, but to incapacitate, focusing on extremities rather than center mass. Through the chaos, James caught a glimpse of Viper moving toward the back of the bar, toward where Emma had fled. With grim determination, James vaulted over an overturned table, closing the distance between them. Viper sensed the pursuit and turned, firing wildly. Bullets splintered the doorframe inches from James's head, but he pressed forward, dodging and weaving through the debris-strewn bar. Sullivan, Viper screamed, his face contorted with hate. This ends tonight. Agreed, James replied, closing the final distance between them. Viper raised his weapon for a killing shot, but James was faster. His hand closed around Viper's wrist, forcing the gun upward as it discharged into the ceiling. With his other hand, James delivered a devastating strike to Viper's solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs. Viper gasped, doubling over, but managed to land a wild punch that connected with James's wounded arm. Pain flared, but James pushed through it, years of SEAL training having conditioned him to compartmentalize such distractions. They grappled amid the destruction, Viper fighting with the desperate ferocity of a cornered animal. He was younger, fueled by hatred, and cocaine, judging by his dilated pupils. But James had experienced discipline, and something more powerful motivating him, a truth he was only beginning to comprehend. With a final surge of strength, James slammed Viper against the wall, pinning him there with an arm across his throat. "Where's the boy?" James demanded, increasing the pressure. Viper struggled, his face reddening. "Screw you." James leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper, meant for Viper alone. "I'll only ask once more. Where is Ryan Hayes?" Something in James's eyes must have conveyed the absolute certainty of what would follow if Viper refused again. The younger man went still, then gasped, "Community College, North Building, room 103, Davies with him." The gunfire had stopped, replaced by the moans of injured men and the heavy breathing of the combatants. Steele approached, blood trickling from a cut above his eye, but otherwise unharmed. "Situation contained," he reported. "4 of them down with injuries, the rest surrendered when they saw their boss caught. Sheriff should be here in 15. James nodded, maintaining his hold on Viper. "We need to get to the community college. They have Emma's brother." Steele's expression hardened. "My boys will handle that. You stay with Emma." As if summoned by her name, Emma emerged from the office, her mother's revolver clutched in shaking hands. She surveyed the destruction of her bar with a mixture of shock and determination. "Ryan," she said simply, "we need to find Ryan." James released Viper to Steele's custody and crossed to Emma. "We will, I promise." He gently took the revolver from her hands. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, then noticed the blood seeping through his sleeve. "You're wounded." "It's nothing," he dismissed. "Emma, I need to tell you something important." The intensity in his voice made her focus on his face, really seeing him perhaps for the first time. "What is it?" James hesitated, words failing him at the crucial moment. How did one tell a stranger that he might be her father, that the anchor and rose tattoo on her wrist matched the one on his shoulder, because her mother had drawn it for him 27 years ago? Instead, he rolled up his sleeve, revealing the tattoo that matched hers exactly. Emma's eyes widened, her gaze moving from his tattoo to her own, then back to his face. "That's impossible," she whispered. "My mother said she designed this herself. She said it was for someone she loved who had to go away," James finished quietly. "Catherine and I were together before my first deployment. I asked her to wait for me. When I came back 6 months later, they told me she had moved away. No forwarding address." Emma stared at him, disbelief and dawning comprehension warring across her features. "She never told me. She never said anything about—" The moment was shattered by Steele's urgent voice. "Sullivan, we've got to move. Now my boys just called. Ryan's not at the college. They took him." The revelation jolted both of them back to the present crisis. Emma's personal earthquake would have to wait. "Go," she said, her voice finding new strength. "Find my brother. We'll talk after." James nodded, already moving toward the door with Steele. As they reached the exit, Emma called after him. "James," he turned. "If what you're suggesting is true, if you really are—" She couldn't finish the sentence, but her eyes conveyed everything words couldn't. "I'll bring him home," James promised. "And then if you'll let me, I'd like to tell you about your mother, about us, about everything." With that, he disappeared into the rainy night, leaving Emma standing amid the ruins of her bar, her entire understanding of her life and history suddenly in question. The storm outside had finally broken, but within Thunder Road and within Emma's heart, an entirely new tempest was just beginning. The rain had subsided to a gentle patter against the windshield as James and Steele raced through the night in Steele's black Ford Expedition. The wipers swept away the remaining droplets in a rhythmic motion that did nothing to calm the storm brewing inside James. The revelation at Thunder Road had shaken him to his core, yet his exterior remained composed, focused on the immediate crisis. "Tell me about Ryan," James said, breaking the tense silence as Steele took a sharp turn onto the highway. Steele kept his eyes on the road, massive hands gripping the wheel. "Good kid. 17, smart as hell, taking college classes while finishing high school. Wants to be an engineer." He glanced briefly at James. "Looks like his mother. Like Emma, too." The implication hung in the air between them. James absorbed the information, adding it to the mental dossier forming in his mind. His son. The thought was still too new, too raw to fully process. "And Emma never knew about me." "Catherine kept that part of her life private," Steele replied. "All I knew was there had been someone special once. Military. Had to leave." He shook his head. "Never connected the dots until I saw that tattoo tonight." The expedition's headlights cut through the darkness as they sped down the empty highway. In the distance, the scattered lights of Tucson glittered like fallen stars. "How did you know Catherine?" James asked, checking the magazine on his personal sidearm, a habit from his SEAL days. Steele's expression softened slightly. "My daughter Charlotte was in a bad accident 10 years back. Catherine was the ER nurse on duty. Doctors had given up, but she refused to. Stayed past her shift, monitored Charlotte through the night." His voice grew rough with emotion. "Saved her life. After that, the Brotherhood adopted Catherine and her family as our own. Been looking out for Emma and Ryan since she passed." James nodded, understanding the code of honor that drove men like Steele. The same code that had guided his own life even after leaving the military. "Viper's crew operates out of an abandoned warehouse on the east side." Steele continued, his tone shifting back to tactical assessment. "My boys are already in position watching the place. No sign of Ryan yet, but 3 vehicles matching the description of those at the bar arrived 15 minutes ago." James checked his watch. Nearly midnight. "We need backup, real backup." He pulled out his phone, scrolling to a contact he hadn't used in years. The call connected after 2 rings. "Martinez." The voice on the other end was alert despite the hour. "It's Sullivan. I'm calling into that favor." A pause. "James Sullivan, Jesus, it's been, 3 years? I need help, Elena. Kidnapping situation, possible ties to drug trafficking. Local law enforcement compromised." Another pause, shorter this time. "Give me details." James outlined the situation in clipped, precise language, omitting the personal revelations of the evening. Special Agent Elena Martinez listened without interruption. "Viper Jackson's on our radar," she confirmed when he finished. "We've been building a case for months, but I need authorization for an op." "We don't have time for bureaucracy," James replied, tension edging his voice. "There's an innocent kid involved." Steele glanced over, his expression grave. "Give me 30 minutes, Martinez said finally. "I'll make some calls, see what I can do. But Sullivan, no cowboy shit, understood. You're a civilian now. Understood. James ended the call as Steele turned onto a darkened industrial road, killing the headlights. They rolled to a stop behind an abandoned office building where 3 motorcycles waited, their riders standing alert in the shadows. Bear Hawk Doc, Steele introduced as they approached. The men nodded to James, assessing him with the practiced eyes of veterans. Bear, a mountain of a man with a graying beard rivaling Steele's, spoke first. Perimeter secured. 2 entrances, 4 visible guards. Loading dock in the rear might provide access. Hawk, younger than the others with sharp features and calculating eyes, pulled out a tablet. Thermal imaging shows approximately 12 bodies inside, one isolated in what looks like an office area. He pointed to a small heat signature separated from the others. Ryan, Steele confirmed. Doc, a lean man with silver temples and steady hands, opened a medical kit. Let me see that arm, Sullivan. James had almost forgotten the bullet graze from the bar fight. He removed his jacket, revealing a bloody sleeve. Doc cleaned and dressed the wound with efficient precision. Former Ranger medic, James guessed. Doc nodded. 3 tours, Afghanistan. As Doc worked, James studied the satellite image of the warehouse on Hawk's tablet. His mind calculated entry points, threat assessment, contingencies. The SEAL in him never truly retired. Martinez is bringing FBI backup, James informed the group, but they're at least 30 minutes out. Ryan may not have that long. Steele nodded grimly. Viper's unstable, always has been. Use's meth makes him unpredictable. We go in now, James decided. Quiet approach, locate Ryan, extract him before FBI arrives. And if we encounter resistance? Bear asked, his hand resting on the sidearm, concealed beneath his leather cut. James met his gaze steadily. Non-lethal if possible. These men need to face justice, not martyrdom. The Brotherhood members exchanged glances, then nodded their agreement. Comms check, Hawk said, distributing earpieces. Channel secure. James accepted the equipment, seamlessly integrating into their operation. It felt familiar, slipping back into this mode like muscle memory awakening after a long dormancy. One more thing, James said as they prepared to move out. Amma doesn't know we're here. I promised her I'd bring Ryan home safely. His voice hardened. I intend to keep that promise. Steele clasped his shoulder. You're not alone in this, Sullivan. The small team moved through the darkness toward the warehouse, using the rain and shadows as cover. James took point, his movements silent and purposeful. Behind him, the Brotherhood members spread out in a tactical formation that spoke of their military background. The warehouse loomed before them, a hulking shadow against the night sky. Security lights cast pools of yellow illumination around the perimeter, creating islands of light in the darkness. 2 guards stood smoking beneath a metal awning, assault rifles slung carelessly over their shoulders. James signaled to Hawk, who nodded and disappeared around the side of the building. Moments later, the security lights flickered and went dark. The guards straightened, suddenly alert. Check the breaker, one ordered the other. As the second guard moved toward the electrical panel, Bear emerged from the shadows behind him. One massive arm wrapping around the guard's neck in a blood choke that rendered him unconscious within seconds. Meanwhile, James approached the remaining guard from behind, his footsteps masked by the gentle rainfall. The guard sensed movement too late. James's hand clamped over his mouth while his other arm applied precise pressure to the carotid artery. The man struggled briefly before slumping in James's grip. Clear, James whispered into his comm, moving to the loading dock. Steele and Doc joined him as they made their way around the building. The loading dock door was secured with a padlock, which Bear made quick work of with a set of bolt cutters. They entered silently, finding themselves in a storage area filled with wooden crates. James crouched, examining one of the open crates. Inside nestled rows of unmarked pill bottles. He pocketed one for evidence. Pharmaceutical counterfeit operation, he murmured to Steele. Explains the territorial expansion. They advanced through the warehouse, encountering 2 more guards who were swiftly neutralized. With each step, James felt the familiar cold focus of combat operations settling over him, a detached precision that had served him well throughout his military career. Voices echoed from ahead, a room illuminated by fluorescent lights that spilled into the darkened storage area. James signaled for the team to hold position as he edged forward to assess the situation. The main floor of the warehouse had been converted into a makeshift lab. Workers in stained clothes operated pill presses and packaging equipment. Armed men patrolled the perimeter. And supervising it all from a raised office platform was Viper pacing back and forth like a caged animal. Beside him, handcuffed to a metal railing, sat a young man with dark hair and Catherine's unmistakable green eyes. Ryan Hayes. The boy's face was bruised but defiant, his posture suggesting he wasn't broken yet. James retreated to the team's position. Ryan's with Viper in the elevated office. 8 armed hostiles on the floor, approximately 6 civilian workers. Civilians complicate things, Steele growled. Agreed, we need a distraction. Hawk grinned, holding up a small device. Way ahead of you, Sullivan. On my signal, James instructed. Bear Doc, take the east side. Steele with me. Hawk, find an elevated position and coordinate. The men moved into position with practiced efficiency. James checked his watch. 10 minutes until Martinez and the FBI could reasonably be expected to arrive. They needed to move now. He caught Steele's eye and nodded. Execute. Hawk's device detonated on the far side of the warehouse, creating a series of small explosions that sounded far more serious than they were. As predicted, most of the armed men rushed toward the disturbance, leaving the main floor undermanned. James and Steele advanced swiftly through the shadows toward the staircase leading to the elevated office. 2 guards remained at the bottom now on high alert. I'll take left, James whispered. Steele nodded. Right's mine. They struck simultaneously, emerging from darkness with devastating precision. James disabled his target with a strike to the solar plexus, followed by an elbow to the temple. Steele's opponent went down equally quickly, victims of decades of combat experience. As gunfire erupted from the far side of the warehouse where Baron Doc had engaged the remaining guards, James ascended the metal staircase, Steele close behind. Through the office window, he could see Viper grabbing Ryan, roughly using him as a shield while drawing his sidearm. James didn't hesitate. He crashed through the door, weapon aimed directly at Viper's head. Let him go. Now. Viper's eyes widened with shock, then narrowed with hatred. Sullivan, should have killed you when I had the chance. Still could, James replied coldly, but I prefer not to orphan your kids like you tried to do to mine. Confusion flickered across Viper's face, quickly replaced by calculation. Yours? What are you talking about? Ryan stared at James, similar confusion evident in his expression. Emma and Ryan, James clarified, his weapon unwavering. Their mother was Catherine Hayes. Understanding dawned in Viper's eyes, followed by a cruel smile. Well, family reunion. How touching. He pressed his gun harder against Ryan's temple. Shame you'll both die tonight. Steele stepped forward, his massive frame filling the doorway. It's over, Viper. FBI's on their way. Warehouse is surrounded. Then I've got nothing to lose. Viper snarled, his finger tightening on the trigger. Time slowed for James. He saw Ryan's defiant eyes, so like his mother's. Saw the desperate madness in Viper's expression. Calculated angles, risks, possibilities with cold precision. In one fluid motion, James lowered his weapon and spread his hands. Wait, kill him and you lose your only bargaining chip. Viper hesitated, suspicion warring with self-preservation. FBI wants me too, James continued, improvising. I've got blood on my hands from classified operations they'd love to prosecute. Take me instead. Let the boy go. James, no, Steele growled. James shot him a warning look, then turned back to Viper. What do you say, me for the kid? You still get a hostage, but one the feds actually care about. Viper's eyes darted between James and Steele, calculating his options. Finally, he nodded. Kick your weapon over here. Then on your knees, hands behind your head. James complied, sliding his pistol across the floor. He knelt slowly, hands raised. Let him go first. Viper pushed Ryan roughly toward Steele. Take the brat. Ryan stumbled forward, Steele steadying him with one massive hand. Go downstairs, son, Steele ordered quietly. Doc will get you somewhere safe. As Ryan moved toward the door, his eyes met James's briefly. A moment of unspoken connection passed between father and son, their first conscious interaction, though neither fully realized its significance yet. Once Ryan was safely out of sight, Viper moved behind James, pressing the gun to his head. You must really care about that kid to trade your life for his. More than you could understand, James replied calmly. Viper laughed, a brittle sound edged with desperation. Well, family man, time to say goodbye. James tensed, preparing to move, but before he could act, the sound of breaking glass filled the room as the window shattered. A canister bounced across the floor, releasing a cloud of tear gas that rapidly filled the enclosed space. Viper staggered back, momentarily blinded and disoriented. James seized the opportunity, launching himself backward and driving his head into Viper's sternum. They crashed to the floor together, struggling for control of the weapon. Through watering eyes, James glimpsed figures in tactical gear swarming the warehouse below. The FBI had arrived. Viper fought with desperate strength, cocaine and adrenaline, lending him unnatural power. He slammed the butt of his pistol into James's wounded arm, sending spikes of pain through his body. But James had endured worse in SEAL training, had learned to compartmentalize pain and function through it. With a practiced movement, he trapped Viper's wrist and twisted, forcing the younger man to release the weapon. It skittered across the floor, out of reach for both of them. They grappled amid the thickening tear gas, each seeking advantage. Viper landed a solid punch to James's ribs, followed by a knee that nearly connected with his groin. James countered with an elbow strike that split Viper's eyebrow, sending blood streaming down his face. "I'm going to kill you," Viper hissed through bloodied teeth. "Then I'll find that girl of yours and finish what I started at the bar." Something primitive and paternal ignited in James at the threat to Emma, a protective rage he'd only felt once before when Sarah was born. With renewed determination, he broke Viper's hold and delivered a devastating combination of strikes that left the younger man reeling. "You won't touch my family," James stated with absolute certainty as he pinned Viper to the ground, securing his wrists. The office door burst open and FBI agents in tactical gear flooded in, weapons trained on both men. "Federal agents, hands where we can see them." James raised one hand, keeping the other firmly on Viper's restrained wrists. "James Sullivan," he identified himself. "This is Raymond Jackson, your primary suspect." Agent Martinez pushed to the front, recognition lighting her face. "Sullivan, should have known you'd be in the middle of this." She gestured to her team. "Secure the suspect." As the agents handcuffed Viper and led him away, Martinez helped James to his feet. "You look like hell." "Feel worse," he admitted, the adrenaline beginning to ebb and pain seeping in to take its place. "Medical team's downstairs," she informed him, then added more quietly, "The boy's safe. Your Brotherhood friends are with him." James nodded gratefully. The warehouse secured. 12 arrests so far, including Jackson. Evidence teams are processing what looks like a major counterfeit pharmaceutical operation. "The pill bottles contain fentanyl," James told her. "They're distributing it disguised as prescription medication." Martinez's expression hardened. "That explains the overdose spike we've been tracking." She studied him curiously. "Want to tell me what your personal stake in this is? And don't give me that you happen to be there routine." James hesitated, then decided on a partial truth. "The boy and his sister are connected to someone I knew a long time ago. I made a promise to bring him home safely." Martinez nodded, not entirely convinced, but willing to let it go for now. "You'll need to give a formal statement." "Tomorrow," James agreed. "Right now I need to get Ryan back to his sister." Outside, the night had cleared, stars emerging from behind dissipating clouds. FBI vehicles surrounded the warehouse, their lights painting the scene in alternating red and blue. Medical personnel attended to injuries while agents processed handcuffed suspects. James found Ryan sitting in the back of an ambulance, a paramedic checking the bruising on his face. Steele stood nearby, a silent guardian. "How is he?" James asked, approaching them. "Tough kid," Steele replied with approval. "Takes after his mother." Ryan looked up as James approached, wariness and curiosity in his gaze. "They said you traded yourself for me in there. Why would you do that?" James studied the young man's face, Catherine's eyes, but a jawline that resembled his own. A son he'd never known existed until tonight. "It was the right thing to do," he answered simply. Ryan's eyes narrowed. "But you mentioned my mom. You knew her." James glanced at Steele, who gave an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. "I did," James confirmed quietly. "A long time ago, before you were born." Understanding dawned slowly in Ryan's eyes. "Wait, are you saying that you're—" "We should talk about this with your sister present," James interrupted gently. "It's complicated." Ryan stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Emma needs to hear this too." The paramedic finished applying a small butterfly bandage to Ryan's eyebrow. "No signs of concussion, but you should still get checked out at a hospital." "I'm fine," Ryan insisted, standing up. "I need to see my sister." James understood the sentiment all too well. "My truck's still at Thunder Road. Steele, can you give us a ride?" The big man nodded. "Already called Emma. Told her we found Ryan and everyone's safe. She's waiting for you both. They walked towards Steele's expedition. Ryan shooting occasional glances at James when he thought the older man wasn't looking. James pretended not to notice, giving the boy space to process the seismic implications of what he'd just learned. As they pulled away from the warehouse, Martinez approached, stopping them briefly. "Sullivan, one more thing." She handed him a small evidence bag containing the pill bottle he'd collected earlier. "Thought you might want this for your statement tomorrow." James took it, nodding his thanks. "And Sullivan," Martinez added, "whatever's going on with you and that family, good luck." The drive back to Thunder Road passed mostly in silence. Ryan sat in the back seat while James rode shotgun beside Steele. Each man lost in his own thoughts, processing the night's events from different perspectives. For James, the reality was still setting in. He had 2 children that he'd never known about. A son and a daughter, both adults now, who had grown up without him. The weight of those lost years pressed heavily on his chest. He thought of Sarah, his daughter from his failed marriage, now a college student in California who barely spoke to him. The irony wasn't lost on him: a daughter who knew him but wanted nothing to do with him, and 2 children who might have wanted a father but never knew he existed. Steele seemed to sense his turmoil. "Catherine was a good mother," he said quietly. "Those kids wanted for nothing that mattered." "Except a father," James replied, his voice equally low. "Better no father than a bad one," Steele countered, "and you couldn't have been there if you didn't know." James stared out at the Arizona landscape passing by in the darkness. 25 years, Steele. 25 years. I didn't know they existed." "And now you do," the older man said simply. "Question is, what are you going to do about it?" Before James could answer, Ryan spoke from the back seat, his voice hesitant but determined. "Did you love her, my mom?" James turned to look at the young man, seeing both Catherine and himself reflected in those searching eyes. "Yes," he answered honestly. "I loved her very much." "Then why did you leave?" The question contained a lifetime of pain and confusion. James recognized it as the same question Sarah had asked during his divorce, though in a very different context. "I didn't know she was pregnant," James explained carefully. "I was deployed overseas with the SEALs. When I came back 6 months later, she was gone. Nobody knew where." Ryan processed this information, his brow furrowed. "She never told us much about our father. Just that he was someone special who had to go away. That he didn't know about us." James nodded, a lump forming in his throat. That sounded like Catherine, honest, but protective. "She gave us both middle names," Ryan continued. "Emma Catherine and Ryan James." The revelation hit James like a physical blow. She had named their son after him. A connection across time and distance, a secret acknowledgement of what they had shared. Steele pulled into the Thunder Road parking lot where a single light burned in the window of the bar. The place looked battered after the earlier confrontation, bullet holes visible in the wooden siding, several windows boarded up hastily. But it was still standing much like its owner. Ryan was out of the vehicle before it fully stopped, rushing toward the entrance. James followed more slowly, his heart hammering in his chest with an anxiety no combat situation had ever produced. Emma appeared in the doorway, her face lighting up at the sight of her brother. She ran to him, enveloping him in a fierce embrace that spoke volumes about their bond. For a moment they clung to each other, the only family they believed they had in the world. James watched from a respectful distance, suddenly uncertain of his place in this reunion. Steele came to stand beside him, a reassuring presence. "They're good kids," Steele observed quietly. "Catherine raised them right." Emma finally released Ryan, her hands moving to his face to examine his injuries. "Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" "I'm fine," Ryan assured her. Then his expression grew serious. "Emma, there's something you need to know." He turned, gesturing toward James. Emma followed his gaze, her expression shifting from relief to something more complicated as she remembered their interrupted conversation from earlier that evening. Steele cleared his throat. "I'll give you folks some privacy," he said tactfully, retreating to his vehicle. Emma approached James slowly, uncertainty in every step. "You found him," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." "I made a promise," James replied simply. Ryan looked between them, confusion evident. "Wait, you two already talked about this?" Emma shook her head. "Not exactly. There wasn't time before." She trailed off, gesturing vaguely toward the damaged bar. An awkward silence fell between the three of them, decades of unspoken truths and unanswered questions hanging in the night air. Finally, James spoke, his voice steady despite the tumult within. I think we should talk. All of us. But not here, not tonight. You both need rest, and I need to give a statement to the FBI in the morning. Emma nodded, visibly relieved at the reprieve. Tomorrow, then. We can meet here around noon. I'll be here, James promised, then hesitated before adding, if that's what you both want. Ryan looked at his sister, then back to James. I want to know everything, he stated firmly. Where you've been, why Mom never told us all of it. James nodded, understanding the boy's hunger for answers. It mirrored his own need to understand the years he'd lost. Tomorrow, he agreed, I'll tell you everything I know. He turned to go, then paused, reaching into his pocket. This belongs to both of you, he said, holding out the photograph he'd carried in his truck. Emma took it tentatively. The image showed a much younger James and Catherine, arms around each other on a beach, both smiling with the untroubled happiness of first love. I've carried that picture for 26 years, James told them quietly. Never knew why I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. Now I understand. Emma's fingers traced Catherine's face in the photograph, her eyes filling with tears. She looked so young, so happy. She was, James confirmed. We both were. With that, he turned and walked back towards Steele's waiting vehicle, giving Emma and Ryan space to absorb the first piece of their newly discovered history. Tomorrow would bring more revelations, more questions, perhaps even anger. But tonight, the first bridge had been built across a 25-year chasm. As he reached the expedition, James glanced back at the siblings standing together in the glow of the Thunder Road sign the photograph held between them. For the first time in years, perhaps since leaving the SEALs, he felt a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. These were his children, whether they ultimately accepted him or not, and he had a lifetime of absence to atone for. Steele started the engine as James climbed in. Back to the motel. James shook his head. No, I need to make a call first. There's someone else who needs to know what's happening. Steele raised an eyebrow questioningly. My daughter, James explained. My other daughter in California, Sarah. Understanding dawned in Steele's weathered face. Families complicated, Sullivan. James looked back at Thunder Road one last time before they pulled away, the silhouettes of Emma and Ryan still visible in the doorway. Yes, he agreed quietly, but it's all that really matters in the end. Morning light spilled through the motel window, painting golden stripes across James Sullivan's face as he stood examining his reflection. The mirror revealed a man weathered by time and experience. The silver at his temples more pronounced than ever, the lines around his eyes deeper after a night of minimal sleep. His wounded arm throbbed dully beneath fresh bandages, a physical reminder of the previous night's confrontation. On the bed lay his phone, the screen still showing the last text message he'd sent to Sarah, his daughter in California. A simple message, need to talk, important, call when you can. She hadn't responded yet. He hadn't expected her to. Their relationship existed in a perpetual state of cautious detachment, occasional text messages replacing what should have been Sunday dinners and holiday gatherings. James buttoned a fresh shirt, dark blue professional, and checked his watch. 9:30. His appointment with FBI agent Martinez wasn't until 10, giving him time to collect his thoughts and prepare his statement about the warehouse raid. Afterward would come the more challenging meeting, facing Emma and Ryan at noon, attempting to explain 25 years of absence he hadn't even known about until yesterday. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Through the peephole, he recognized Steele's imposing figure. He opened the door to find the biker leader holding 2 cups of coffee. Figured you could use this, Steele said, offering one of the cups. Bureau blend will taste like warmed-over transmission fluid. James accepted with a nod of thanks, gesturing Steele inside the sparse motel room. Any word from Thunder Road? Steele settled his large frame into a chair that seemed too small to contain him. Emma's opening the bar today despite everything. Girl's tougher than she looks. Ryan's helping her clean up. Catherine's influence, James observed, sipping the coffee. And yours, whether you knew it or not, Steele replied, studying James thoughtfully. That boy has your stubbornness. Emma, too. James absorbed this, another piece of the puzzle that was his newly discovered family. Did you tell them about my military background? What happened at the warehouse? Not my story to tell. Steele shook his head. But they know you put yourself between Ryan and a bullet. That carries weight. James moved to the window, looking out at the sun-drenched parking lot without really seeing it. I keep thinking about Catherine. Why she never told me, why she left without a word. Steele was quiet for a moment before answering. People have their reasons, Sullivan. Sometimes good ones. I deserve to know I had children. James countered a rare flash of anger, breaking through his composure. Maybe, or maybe Catherine was protecting them. Or you. Steele set his empty cup aside. You were what 2021 heading off to war. 22, James confirmed quietly. First deployment as a SEAL. We'd been together almost a year. And if she'd told you, what would you have done? James turned from the window, meeting Steele's gaze directly. I would have married her, asked for a stateside assignment. Given up your career, Steele translated. Your dream. The observation struck home with uncomfortable precision. James had wanted nothing more than to be a SEAL back then, had trained ruthlessly, pushing himself beyond normal human limits to qualify. Would he truly have given it up if Catherine had told him about the pregnancy? He wanted to believe he would have, but doubt crept in around the edges of that certainty. Water under the bridge now, James said finally. All that matters is what happens next. Steele nodded, rising from the chair. Speaking of which, I'll drive you to the FBI field office. Save you the cab fare. James gathered his jacket and the evidence bag Martinez had given him the night before. As they walked to the parking lot, Steele asked casually, your other daughter, she call you back yet? No, James replied, his tone making it clear the subject wasn't open for discussion. Steele nodded, respecting the boundary. When you're done with the feds, I'll bring you to Thunder Road. Brotherhood's keeping an eye on the place today, just in case any of Viper's crew got ideas about retaliation. The drive to the FBI field office passed mostly in silence, each man absorbed in his own thoughts. When they arrived, Steele waited in the parking lot, his presence a silent affirmation of support that James found unexpectedly comforting. Inside, Agent Martinez greeted him with professional courtesy, leading him to a conference room where another agent waited to take his statement. For the next hour, James recounted the events at Thunder Road and the warehouse with methodical precision, detailing Viper's operation, while carefully omitting the personal revelations about Emma and Ryan. Some secrets weren't his to share, not yet, not until he'd spoken with his children first. The counterfeit operation was substantial. Martinez noted it, examining the pill bottle James had provided. Preliminary testing confirms fentanyl disguised as oxycodone, street value in the millions. Viper mentioned expansion plans, James added. Territorial moves. Martinez nodded. Matches our intelligence. We've had him under surveillance for months, but couldn't get enough for a warrant. She gave James a measured look. Until last night's kidnapping and assault provided probable cause. Convenient timing, James observed neutrally. Very. Martinez agreed, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. Almost as convenient as a former SEAL with extensive counter-narcotics experience happening to be in that particular bar when trouble started. James maintained an impassive expression. Like I said, I was helping friends. Martinez didn't push further, merely closing her notebook with a decisive snap. We'll need you to testify when this goes to trial. I'll be around, James assured her, though in truth he had no idea what his future held beyond the meeting awaiting him at Thunder Road. As they walked toward the exit, Martinez paused. Sullivan, off the record, whatever's going on with you and those kids at the bar, I hope it works out. James studied her face, finding genuine goodwill there. Thank you. Just don't disappear before the trial, she added, professional once more. I'd hate to have to hunt you down. Wouldn't dream of it. Outside, Steele waited patiently, his massive form leaning against the expedition. He straightened as James approached. All clear with the feds. For now, James confirmed. Viper's looking at federal charges for the drug operation, kidnapping, and attempted murder. He won't see daylight for decades. Steele nodded with satisfaction as they climbed into the vehicle. Good. One less problem for Emma and Ryan. As Steele navigated through Tucson traffic, James's phone vibrated in his pocket. He glanced at the screen, his expression shifting as he saw Sarah's name. Need to take this, he said quietly. Steele nodded, turning down the radio to give him privacy. James answered, his voice carefully neutral. Sarah, thanks for calling back. Dad, the single word carried a complex mixture of obligation and wariness. Your message sounded important. Everything okay? I'm fine, he assured her, but something's happened. Something unexpected. A pause. Are you in trouble? No, nothing like that. James chose his words carefully. I've discovered something about my past, about a relationship before I met your mother. Another pause longer this time. Okay. It seems I have two other children, a daughter and a son. Their mother never told me about them. The words felt surreal even as he spoke them. They're adults now, 25 and 17. Silence stretched across the connection. James waited, giving Sarah space to process this bombshell. So I have siblings? She finally asked, her voice unreadable. Yes. And you're just finding out about this now. How is that even possible? James sighed. It's complicated. Their mother and I were together before my first deployment. When I came back, she was gone. No forwarding address, no explanation. And you never looked for her? The question held a hint of accusation. I did, James admitted, for months. Then I was deployed again. Life moved on. He paused. I met your mother a year later. Sarah absorbed this, then asked the question he'd been dreading. Does Mom know about them? Not yet. I wanted to tell you first. Another long silence. I need time to process this, Sarah finally said. It's a lot. I understand, James replied, trying to keep disappointment from his voice. I'm meeting them today. To talk, explain what I can. Good luck with that, Sarah said, her tone softening slightly. Let me know how it goes, okay? I will, he promised, recognizing the small olive branch for what it was. And Sarah, thank you for calling back. Yeah, well, you said it was important. A hesitation. Bye, Dad. Goodbye, Sarah. The call ended, leaving James staring at the darkened screen. Not the enthusiastic response he might have hoped for, but better than he'd feared. At least she hadn't hung up immediately. Steele kept his eyes on the road, offering no comment on the conversation he'd inevitably overheard. James appreciated the discretion. Thunder Road appeared ahead, its weather-beaten sign standing proud against the clear blue Arizona sky. Despite the damage from the previous night, the parking lot contained several vehicles, regular customers showing support through their presence. James recognized the Brotherhood's motorcycles parked in a neat row along the side of the building. Looks like business as usual, Steele observed. Resilience, James noted. Like mother, like daughter. They parked and James felt an unfamiliar sensation as he exited the vehicle. Nervousness. He who had infiltrated terrorist compounds and conducted hostage rescues without a tremor of doubt now found his heart racing at the prospect of a conversation. Steele sensed his hesitation. They're just people, Sullivan. Your people. James nodded, squaring his shoulders. Let's do this. Inside, Thunder Road hummed with subdued activity. The damage from the previous night's confrontation had been hastily addressed. Bullet holes patched with wood putty, broken furniture, removed the floor freshly mopped. A few regulars sat at the bar nursing beers, while Brotherhood members occupied their usual corner table. All eyes turned briefly toward James as he entered, then respectfully returned to their drinks. Behind the bar stood Emma, her red hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, efficiently filling drink orders, while maintaining light conversation with the customers. She moved with the same grace James had noticed yesterday, though today her movements carried a tension that hadn't been present before. She looked up as the door closed behind him, their eyes meeting across the room. For a moment, neither moved. Then she nodded slightly toward a door marked office. James made his way through the bar, conscious of the weight of unspoken history between them. He knocked lightly on the office door. Come in, called Ryan's voice from within. The office was small but tidy, dominated by a desk covered with invoices and bar receipts. A small safe sat into the corner, presumably containing the revolver Emma had wielded the night before. Ryan sat behind the desk, a textbook open before him despite the circumstances, studying even now. James recognized the determination of someone fighting for a better future. Your sister said to meet in here, James explained, remaining by the door. Ryan nodded. She'll be in soon. Just needed to get Jerry set up to cover the bar. He gestured to a chair. You can sit. James took the offered seat, studying the young man who was his son. In daylight, the resemblance was even more striking. Catherine's eyes and smile, but James's jawline and build. The bruises from his ordeal were more visible now, a darkening along his cheekbone and the split in his eyebrow neatly closed with a butterfly bandage. How are you feeling? James asked. Been better, Ryan admitted, touching his face gingerly. But I've had worse from high school football. Ooh, James nodded, recognizing the teenage bravado for what it was, a shield against vulnerability. Emma said you traded yourself for me, Nee. Ryan continued, his tone carefully neutral. At the warehouse. Seemed like the right play at the time, James replied simply. Ryan studied him with an intensity beyond his years. You could have died. Occupational hazard, James said with a slight shrug. Former Navy SEAL, risk assessment is part of the job. Before Ryan could respond, the door opened and Emma entered, closing it firmly behind her. She'd removed her apron but still wore the Thunder Road t-shirt and jeans that seemed to be her uniform. Her expression was guarded, emotions held carefully in check. Jerry's covering the bar, she informed them, leaning against the desk rather than sitting. We have about an hour before the lunch rush. James nodded, acknowledging the time constraint. The practicalities of running a business wouldn't pause for life-altering revelations. I assume Ryan told you what happened at the warehouse, he asked. Emma nodded. Steele filled me in this morning, said you offered yourself in exchange for Ryan, that the FBI arrived just in time. Her voice softened slightly. Thank you for that. No thanks necessary, James replied. I couldn't let anything happen to him. A heavy silence fell over the small office. 25 years of absence compressed into this single awkward moment. Finally, Ryan broke the tension. So, are you really our father? The direct question, so characteristic of youth, cleared the air like a thunderclap. James met the boy's gaze steadily. Yes, he answered simply. I believe I am. Emma's posture stiffened. You believe you're not certain, James turned to her. I knew your mother, loved her, the timeline fits. And then there's this. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing the tattoo that matched Emma's, the anchor intertwined with a rose. Catherine designed this herself for me before my first deployment. Said it represented strength anchored by love. Emma unconsciously touched her own wrist where the identical design resided. Mom always said it was special, that my father had one just like it. James nodded, rolling his sleeve back down. I just completed SEAL training. We'd been together almost a year. I asked her to wait for me, gave her my grandmother's ring. When I returned 6 months later, she was gone. No note, no forwarding address. Why would she just leave? Ryan asked, confusion evident in his voice. James shook his head. That's what I've been asking myself since last night. We were happy, at least I thought we were. I had plans, dreams for us. She never said anything negative about you, Emma offered quietly. Just that you were someone special who had to go away. That you didn't know about us. I didn't, James confirmed, his voice rough with emotion. If I had known, if I'd had any idea, what? Emma challenged, a hint of steel entering her tone. What would you have done? I would have found you, James stated without hesitation. Both of you, I would have been there. You can't know that, Emma countered. You were 20-something career military. Most guys that age run from responsibility, not toward it. I'm not most guys, James replied evenly. Ryan intervened before Emma could respond. Did you love her, our mom? The question caught James off guard with its earnestness. He looked at the photograph on the desk, the same one he'd given them last night, now displayed in a simple frame. Catherine's smiling face looked back at him across the decades. Yes, he answered honestly. Very much. She was extraordinary. Brilliant, compassionate, stubborn as hell. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. She could put me in my place with just a look. Emma's expression softened fractionally. She never remarried, never even dated seriously that I can remember. The revelation landed heavily in James's chest. Had Catherine been waiting all those years? Had she regretted her decision to leave? What about you? Ryan asked. Did you get married? Do we have other siblings? James nodded slowly. I married about 4 years after Catherine disappeared. We had a daughter, Sarah. She's 20 now, in college in California. He paused. The marriage ended 5 years ago, my fault mostly. Too many deployments, too much time away. Emma and Ryan exchanged glances, absorbing this new information, the existence of a half-sister they had never known about. Does she know about us? Emma asked. I told her this morning, James confirmed. It's a lot for her to process too. Ryan leaned forward, his academic mind clearly assembling facts. So you're saying you had no idea we existed until last night? In 25 years, you never suspected? Never, James affirmed. If I had nothing would have kept me from finding you. But why wouldn't Mom tell you, Ryan persisted. It doesn't make sense. James sighed, running a hand through his silver-streaked hair. That's what I can't figure out. The Catherine I knew was forthright honest. Keeping something like this secret doesn't fit with the woman I loved. Emma's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Unless she had a compelling reason? What reason could possibly justify keeping children from their father? James asked, a hint of his suppressed anger finally surfacing. Protection, Emma suggested quietly. The word hung in the air between them, loaded with implication. Protection from what? James asked, his voice dangerously soft. Emma shrugged. I don't know, but Mom was fiercely protective of us, impractical to her core. If she kept us from you, she believed she had good reason. The suggestion stung, but James couldn't dismiss it entirely. His younger self had been driven, ambitious, focused exclusively on his SEAL career. Would he have been a good father? Then he'd like to think so, but his track record with Sarah hardly supported that belief. Maybe, he conceded, but I deserve the chance to try on. Ryan had been quiet, watching the exchange with thoughtful eyes. Now he spoke up. You said you gave Mom a ring before you deployed. James nodded. My grandmother's engagement ring. Small diamond antique setting. Nothing fancy, but it meant something to me. Emma and Ryan exchanged another glance, some silent communication passing between them. Mom had a ring she always wore on a chain, Emma explained. Never took it off, even in the shower. Said it was her most precious possession. After she died, Ryan continued, we found a letter with it, instructions that it should be buried with her. James felt his throat tighten. She kept it all those years. Emma nodded. She never stopped loving you, whoever you were. That much I'm certain of. The revelation shifted something fundamental in James's understanding of the past 25 years. Catherine hadn't abandoned him out of indifference or casual cruelty. She had carried their love with her, literally worn it against her heart every day of her life. I need to know why, he said finally. Why she left. Why she never told me about you two. Mom's sister might know, Ryan suggested. Aunt Valerie, they were close. Valerie Hayes, James's eyebrows rose in surprise. She's still around, Emma nodded. Lives in Phoenix. She comes to visit every few months. James remembered Valerie, Catherine's older sister, who had never approved of her dating a military boy with dangerous ambitions. If anyone had influenced Catherine's decision to leave, Valerie would have been at the top of the list. I need to talk to her, James decided. She's actually coming this weekend, Ryan informed him. For Mom's birthday, we always do something special. The coincidence seemed almost too perfect, or perhaps not a coincidence at all, but the universe's way of bringing long-separated lives back into alignment. Would you mind if I stayed in town until then? James asked carefully. I'd like to get to know both of you better if you're willing, and maybe get some answers from Valerie. Emma and Ryan exchanged glances again, that silent sibling communication that excluded him. Finally, Emma nodded. You can stay, she agreed, but I need you to understand something. Ryan and I are okay. We've built a life, run this business, made our own family. She gestured vaguely toward the bar where the Brotherhood sat. We're not looking for someone to sweep in and fix things or take over. I understand, James replied, recognizing the Declaration of Independence for what it was. I'm not here to disrupt your lives, just to be a part of them, if you'll let me. Ryan seemed satisfied with this answer, but Emma remained guarded. We'll see, she said simply. Actions speak louder than words. Before James could respond, a knock sounded at the office door. Emma opened it to reveal one of the Brotherhood members. Hawk, if James remembered correctly. Sorry to interrupt, Hawk said, but we've got company outside. Black SUV, government plates. Lady asking for Sullivan. Martinez, James surmised, rising from his chair. Probably follow-up questions about the warehouse. I should get back to the bar anyway, Emma said, clearly relieved at the interruption. Lunch rush will be starting soon. And I have a calculus test to study for, Ryan added, closing his textbook. James recognized the tactical retreat but didn't push. They had made progress, small tentative steps toward understanding. It was enough for now. I'll come back tomorrow, he said, if that's all right. Emma nodded, her expression softening slightly. Thunder Road's open every day but Monday. You're welcome anytime. It wasn't an enthusiastic invitation, but it was a beginning. James would take it. Outside, Agent Martinez leaned against her bureau-issued SUV sunglasses, shielding her eyes from the Arizona sun. She straightened as James approached. Sullivan, twice in one day. People will talk. What can I do for you, Agent Martinez? James asked, keeping his tone professional, despite their long history. She removed her sunglasses, her expression serious. Vipers talking, making deals, naming names. She paused. Including yours. James stiffened. What about me? Operation Sandstorm, Phoenix 2008. The code name sent a chill through James despite the desert heat. A classified operation that had gone sideways, resulting in multiple civilian casualties. An operation that had been officially disavowed by the government, leaving the SEAL team involved in a precarious legal position. That operation doesn't exist in any official record, James said carefully. Viper claims his brother told him otherwise, Martinez replied. Says you were the sniper who took the shot that killed those civilians. James's expression hardened. His brother was a drug trafficker and a liar. I know, Martinez assured him, but the accusation alone could cause problems for you. Reopening old wounds, investigations, media attention. She glanced meaningfully toward Thunder Road. Complications for your personal situation. The threat was clear. Viper might be going down, but he was determined to take James with him, or at least disrupt his newly discovered family connections. What's your interest in this, Elena? James asked, using her first name for the first time that day. Martinez sighed. Look, James, we've known each other a long time. I respect what you did in the service. I'm here as a courtesy off the books to give you a heads up. She paused. And to suggest that maybe lying low for a while might be prudent. Leaving town, you mean, James translated. Running. Strategic retreat, Martinez corrected, just until we can discredit Viper's claims and get this whole thing buried again. James looked back at Thunder Road where Emma was visible through the window efficiently tending bar. Ryan sat at a table near the Brotherhood textbook open beside his lunch. His children finally found after 25 years. Not an option, he stated firmly. I'm done running from the past. Martinez studied him, then nodded slowly. I figured you'd say that. Just be prepared for things to get messy. Always am, James assured her. As Martinez drove away, Steele approached from the bar entrance. Everything okay? James considered the question, weighing the complications of his past against the possibilities of his future. Nothing I can't handle. Steele nodded, accepting the non-answer. Emma asked if you'd join us for lunch. Said you might as well meet the whole family if you're sticking around. The invitation, unexpected after Emma's cautious demeanor in the office, warmed something in James's chest. I'd like that. Inside, the lunch crowd had grown, filling Thunder Road with conversation and laughter. The atmosphere had transformed from the tense standoff of the previous night into something warm and welcoming. Emma worked the bar with practiced efficiency while Ryan divided his attention between his textbook and a plate of fries. The Brotherhood made room at their table as James approached Bear, pushing out a chair with his boot. Sullivan, here you're sticking around for a while. That's the plan, James confirmed, taking the offered seat. Doc slid a menu across the table. Burgers here are worth staying for alone. James accepted the menu, but found his attention drawn to Emma and Ryan, his children. The thought still seemed surreal, yet undeniably right. They carried pieces of him. In Ryan's determined set of the jaw, in Emma's way of analyzing situations before acting. They also carried pieces of Catherine, her compassion, her resilience, her unwavering sense of responsibility. She had raised them well without his help. The realization brought both gratitude and regret. As he watched Emma laugh at something a customer said, James made a silent promise to Catherine wherever she might be. He would protect their children. He would earn their trust. He would be the father they deserved, even decades too late. His phone vibrated in his pocket. A text message from Sarah. Call me tonight. Want to hear more about them. A small olive branch, but significant, coming from his estranged daughter. Perhaps there was hope there too, not just for reconciliation with the children he'd just discovered, but with the one he'd lost touch with as well. Ryan glanced up from his textbook, meeting James's gaze across the room. After a moment's hesitation, the boy offered a small, tentative smile. James returned it, feeling something long dormant awakening within him. Steele's deep voice interrupted his thoughts. Family's never simple, Sullivan, but it's always worth fighting for. James nodded, watching as Emma delivered plates to a nearby table, her movements efficient and graceful. Some things are, he agreed quietly. The challenge ahead would not be easy. There would be questions to answer, trust to build, and now thanks to Viper's accusations, ghosts from his military past to confront. But for the first time in years, James Sullivan felt something like hope. Thunder Road had started as just another stop on his aimless journey. Now it felt like a destination, perhaps even a beginning. As if sensing his thoughts, Emma looked up, their eyes meeting across the crowded bar. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod before returning to her work. Not forgiveness or acceptance, not yet, but acknowledgement. Recognition of shared blood and history. An opening. It was enough for now. The rest would come with time, with patience, with the steady rebuilding of connections long severed. James Sullivan, who had survived battlefields across the world, settled in to face his greatest challenge, yet becoming the father his children deserved 25 years late. Outside, the Arizona sun blazed in a cloudless sky, its light falling equally on past and future, illuminating both with merciless clarity and unexpected grace.